Absolutely.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So I'm going to go through account settings. So these are things that you really need to be aware of to really optimize your sending capabilities. So things like email account settings. So I'll walk you through that. And then Josh is going to take over and he's going to walk through some campaign setup features with you, as well as some campaign best practices.
Sounds
Let's
good.
go. All right. So I'm in my account right now. We'll use this one. So I just came to the more drop down. I went to settings. This is my account information right here. I'm going to hop into email accounts right here. So with our reply plans, the lowest tier plan, you're allocated one sending address, as you can see right here. We do have other plans where you can have two allocated, or you can purchase additional email accounts for $29 per month. So I'm going to click on my email account right here, and I'm going to go through some of these settings. So under sending and receiving, mine is set up to SMTP. There's also a single click option as well. You can utilize that. That would probably be the easiest option. That's just going to connect your password. You don't need to enter any other credentials such as SMTP or IMAP ports. Under safety settings, this is really important to keep in mind. So you can see right here, it says total number of emails per day. So mine is set to 200. You can increase that to up to 400 emails per day, depending on your email provider. If you do want to increase your daily limit, I would recommend that you warm up your email account. So if your email account has not been typically sending high volumes, or if you maybe taking a break from outreach, or if it's a brand new email account, we would typically recommend that you lower this limit to about 40 emails per day. And then maybe on a weekly basis, come into your email account settings and increase it by about 20 to 30 emails per day. This setting right here is account wide. So if you have it set to 200 emails per day, if you have 10 sequences running from this sending address, it will cap out at 200 across all those 10 sequences. So that's something to keep in mind as well. If you are using Microsoft as your email provider, I would highly recommend that you utilize this feature right here. So enable limit of emails per minute. So the default is 30. It says right here for best practices, keep it lower than 30. So if you want to keep it at 30, you should be good to go. I've spoken to customers who keep it at 1 or 10, whatever you're comfortable with. This is where you can input your email signature. If you input your email signature here, you won't have to include it in each step of the sequence that you're creating. We will automatically pull this signature and it will get sent with every email that you sent via reply. One thing to note, again, in terms of best practices, pay attention to the number of hyperlinks that you have in your email signature. For example, I've seen customer accounts where they have 5 hyperlinks. That could result in your emails going to spam, getting red flagged as spam. So keep it to maybe 1 to 2 links in your email signature, maybe a calendar link, maybe a link to your company's website, whatever you think is going to bring more value to you. You can see down here at the bottom, you can change the style, the font. You can also insert images, and then this is the hyperlink option as well. And then right here, we have your opt-out options. So I'm going to open that up for you guys right here. So there are 2 options. So you can unsubscribe via plain text. For a lot of you, if you have a new account, what you'll see right here is PS, if you don't want to hear from me anymore, just let me know. You can edit this to say whatever you want to say, or you can delete it like I did. The way that this works is once someone replies to you, if they say anything along the lines of do not contact, remove me from your list, don't email me anymore, unsubscribe, the platform will pick up on those keywords and will mark them as opted out. Once someone has an opted out status applied to them, you will not be able to send emails to them via reply. So even if you try to move them to a sequence, if they have that opted out status, they won't get moved. You also have the option to unsubscribe via opt-out link. So it's just the way that it sounds. There's going to be a link that says unsubscribe. Your prospects will click on it. They'll be marked as opted out. I like the plain text option better, just because the whole point of the platform is for your emails to appear warm and personal. You want those contacts to think that you are typing this email just for them. And then, if they see an unsubscribe link at the bottom, they may think, it's a mailing list. But whatever you prefer, it's really up to you. They both work in the same way. All right. So I'm going to hop over into the email settings right here, just do a quick walkthrough of these settings right here. Again, these settings are account wide. So we have your email safety options right here. You have some options for, handling out of office, auto reply, and bounced emails. We have a delay before sending that first email. It's automatically set to 30 seconds. And maximum number of emails to a single contact per day. This is set to 1. I would recommend keeping it at 1, but really depending on your sequence configuration, you may want to increase that to 2 or 3. The reason that it's set to 1 is because you don't want your prospects getting bombarded with emails from you, because that could result in them reporting you as spam. Under email notifications, you can select the option to get reports sent to your email. So for example, sending reports on sequence errors. So if, for example, your sequence is paused or suspended, maybe there was a connection error with your email account, you will get those notifications to your email. So then you would just know to log into your account and fix that error. We also have BCC settings right here. So if you want to provide email addresses for outgoing emails or incoming emails. And you also have the option to not forward out of office, auto reply, or bounced emails. You can also utilize this with your Salesforce or HubSpot BCC email as well. Under custom fields, this is where you can add any custom variables that you want to utilize in your sequence. So you'll notice when Josh goes through the sequence setup, we do have some, what's the word I'm looking for? Some pre-made variables, the default variables that we do have there. But if you do want to add some custom variables, this is where you would add them right here. I think there's a maximum of 50. As you can see on our team account, we have quite a few of them right here. And then you have some out of office options as well. So let me just see if I can open this here. There we go. So you do have the option to turn on the resume out of office. By default, it is set to 14 days. You can change this number here if you want. You can lower it. So what this does, if you email a prospect, if you get an out of office reply with this feature turned on, the sequence will automatically resume in 14 days or whatever length of time that you specified right there. So yeah, so those are all the settings that you should be aware of. And again, like I said, they are account wide, so they are going to affect all the sequences that you are sending. So I believe Josh is going to go into a campaign setup. So yeah, Josh, take it away.
Thank you very much. We did get chat enabled. We've got a couple of questions coming through already to Rob. We will talk about some advanced functions today, but we're really doing separate sessions for things like LinkedIn. We're going to talk about triggers a little bit today, but there will be more of a deep dive into all of those aspects later on. If you have a specific question, feel free to let us know. But yeah, I will dive in from there. All righty. So hopefully you can all see my screen. Hello, viewers. Thank you for coming today. So we will walk through a new sequence from top to bottom. Before we dive into that, if you go to the sequences page, hit new sequence, you will get 3 options listed for you. From template is going to give you a list of reply curated options. We have divided them into different use cases. So if you're struggling to figure out what content to write based on your particular use case, diving in here will give you a good kind of structure to work off of. Obviously needs heavy editing, but this will get you on the right track. We also have from Magic, so this is using kind of GPT technology. This is going to create and dynamically adjust an email sequence for you based on kind of core concepts that you want to include. So this is a pretty cool new tool that you guys can try out. And we're obviously looking to improve it as much as possible into the future. So if you want to give it a go, feel free to. But for today's session, we will primarily be working out of a from scratch sequence. And that will walk you through a step-by-step guide to include all of the elements that are most welcome into a brand new sequence. Do keep in mind that our system is designed to be innovated upon and iterated upon based on the interactions that you see incoming. So what this means is we are never going to lock you in. If you don't have all of your steps in mind right out of the gate, you can just add one kind of placeholder and then come back to your sequence at any point down the line, whether it's a few hours old or a few years, it will always be available for you. So you can add new steps, change subject lines, change bodies, add new people, whatever it is, we give you guys those options. So we'll click on add sequence step here, which will bring you to an editor very similar to what we saw with these signatures. As we begin typing out our content, you'll notice that this little progress bar will begin to populate. This is a live comparison to our top performing sequences on the platform. So it's not designed to be taken as a guarantee one way or another that you will or will not receive a response. It's just going to show you how closely in line your content matches up with our top performers using reply. This is also looking at a cold email sales centric focus. So the further away you get from that kind of core idea, the less ubiquitous these are going to be. But we do find that things like subject length, word count, and question count are pretty ubiquitous. So those are the areas that we would recommend paying the most attention to. For things like reading level and positivity, those can be notoriously difficult to nail in the green 100% of the time. So we do recommend just aiming for tone over anything else. The idea behind all of these metrics is to move you away from very generically sounding emails into more of a conversational style. So as long as you would respond to the message that you're sending, you're probably on the right track. Otherwise, a thesaurus and a dictionary by your side will always prove handy. Lastly, for this section is the spam words count. So you can see here when I hover over it, it flagged the word hello. Being comparative in nature, it's very difficult to avoid very common words for poor campaigns as well as great ones. So again, this is not words that are going to get you into spam folders, not even necessarily words that are perceived as spam. They're words that are very commonly used, and we're flagging them so you can kind of update your terminology to make it stand out more from the rest of the crowd. Words like call will show up here quite a bit, a free, discount, sale, all of those very kind of generic sales terminology. So don't feel bad if you start to rack these up. I think using one of each of those words is probably fine. The bigger issue is redundancy. You don't want to sound too repetitive. You don't want to lean too much into that kind of, again, generic sales sounding email.
Yeah, and I would say, keep an eye on that toggle. Once you notice that it starts to go to like yellow, caution, red, then go back into your step and then maybe consider switching out some of those spam words just to lower that count.
Yeah, again, always just designed to get you to a more unique place, and replacing any of these terms, hey instead of hello, should be perfectly fine. You can also see a live preview of what your message will look like in the context of an inbox. Let me just grab one of our templated options here. And it will show you any variables that we've included. So you can see first name was automatically filled in, yet company was left blank. We are pulling this information directly from the profiles that you are importing into the system, whether that be through a CSV file or from an integration with something like Pipedrive, HubSpot, or Salesforce. In the event that we don't find the information that we need to fill in a variable, rest assured, we will not send out an email saying, hoping to reach the person responsible for recruiting a company. We will simply mark the individuals missing that information as missing data, and they will not receive an email until you go in and specifically address that individual. So whether that be by removing the variable from their personal preview or by updating their profile to include the company information. We also have options for things like fallback variables. So in the event that you don't have that information, you can set a fallback. So in the case that you don't have the company, it'll default to your company instead. And you can use these fallback systems for pretty much any of your variables as long as you follow this same structure. To that point, we always do recommend pulling your variables directly from this menu here. If you try to manually type them out, if for whatever reason you use the wrong variables or the wrong brackets, sorry, that does not qualify as a variable anymore, and it will go out as typed. We unfortunately can't prevent everything. So as long as you're using this dropdown, you should be completely in the clear. Again, we have all of the usual bells and whistles. You can add images, attachments. We even have a little Vidyard integration if you want to embed your videos directly into the content itself. And we have a new meeting system. It's designed in a similar fashion to Calendly. So if anybody's familiar with that, it works almost identically. And it does come free with your plans. This will also allow you to get status updates if someone books a meeting through the link you use here. Whereas if you use an external calendar system, you would have to hop between platforms in order to get the full picture. You can save any individual step as a template, and then you will be able to find that template under your personal tab or your team tab here. The team tab can be shared for all users on your subscription. So it's a good way to help kind of propagate any well-performing sequences. Otherwise, you can continue making them from scratch at any point. You can also send instant tests to whatever inbox that you'd like, again, to get an even better idea of what these will look like compared to Gmail or maybe a Microsoft account. Once you hit save, the step will exist and you will notice an add variant option. So this is your cue to add any A/B testing. So you can test out different subject lines, different bodies. The system will split your list of contacts as evenly as possible amongst the variants. So you don't have to pick and choose who gets which option. It's just going to split it down the middle. If you find that one version is clearly outperforming the other, you can pause the versions that you don't like. It'll get grayed out. And then anybody remaining on that step will be funneled through the active options instead. And we do have full reporting on the different A/B tests, how A is doing versus B. There's no real limit to the number of variants you can include, though do keep in mind that there's going to be diminishing returns based on the number of contacts that you do include into a sequence. For example, we recommend around 100 people per variant just to get the most actionable data you can. Otherwise, you're really working with skewed numbers and it may not be fully representative of what version is working best. Once you're done with your variants for that particular step, you can click on the email icon again, and we can set up a step 2. So let me just grab another one here. And we will hit save. Oh, it looks like this one has some outdated variables. So let's just find another one here. There we go. So you'll notice that I have a second subject line here. The way that reply operates is if you include a subject line for your follow-up steps, no matter what that subject line is, even if it's the exact same thing as your step 1, this will send out independently. If you want your step 2 message to send as a direct response to your previous one, you can simply leave the subject line completely blank, and that will keep everything in the original thread. In Gmail, that looks like just one kind of massive thread with a number of replies. In other inboxes, it may appear as a colon and the original subject. It will adapt depending on the inbox of your recipients.
Josh, I have a quick question.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's also a question in the chat that we're going to get to from another Josh. So we'll get to that in a couple minutes.
Good name. I like it.
Right. My question for you is, when creating a sequence and kind of trying to decide, do I want to create a thread? Do I want to have distinct emails going out? What would be the best kind of configuration in your opinion?
So it does depend on what you're goals are for the sequence, but traditionally we recommend a 5-step structure, and the first 3 will typically be threaded together. The reason for that is it's pretty logical. If you receive an email from a stranger unprovoked, would you rather have one thread with all of the information in that, or would you rather have like 5 separate emails from this person that you don't know? Most people would say one because it's a little easier to interact with. And it's simply kind of just more, it builds a little bit more trust by keeping it clean. And all of the information that you're trying to convey is going to be in one nice location. Whereas if you're sending a number of one-offs, it looks spammier than you probably intend it to be. Though we do recommend starting a new thread later on. If I were to go through my first 3 steps, when I hit step 4, I will introduce a new subject line to kind of reinvigorate the conversation after a few days, maybe try to introduce some new concepts and start a brand new thread to hopefully pick up from where we left off. Hope that answers your question.
Yes, yes, thank you. And yes, continue. We'll get to the questions in chat when you're done.
Beautiful. For today, we're going to just cover the basics of all of these additional step types. There are free versions that everybody has access to, and then there are paid upgrades. So for calls, SMS, WhatsApp, LinkedIn, if you're not using the paid add-on, they functionally act as sticky notes. They are reminders to perform a function outside of the regular reply chain. They will not do anything on their own. Using calls as an example, you can essentially write yourself a little script here to leave voicemails or kind of help you walk through a call if you're trying to drop a pitch or something. When someone gets to this stage, a task will be generated for them. You will then have to go to the tasks menu or the Chrome extension and manually perform those through the task or Chrome extension. If you were to use the paid upgrade, a dialer will be accessible through the drop-down menu in the top right corner. And you'll also be able to call people from within their profiles directly on the platform. You'll have full access to voicemail drops and things like that. You'll also be able to send SMS messages directly in the thread in the same manner that the emails do. So there are definitely benefits, but if you're already using kind of third-party tools and are happy with your setup, these are just going to be reminders to use those systems. Same thing goes for LinkedIn. If I add a LinkedIn step directly here, and we do have options for things like connections, profile views, and liking their recent posts. By default, everything should be set to manual if you don't have LinkedIn enabled in the account. And again, same thing, the task will be generated. You can then go into that task. If you click into the task, there will be an option to open up the LinkedIn page on their profile, and it will automatically populate the message that you've written. So it will help expedite the process. But again, it's not going to just send out the message for you. The paid upgrade, however, will send the message, send the connection request completely automatically in, again, the same fashion as the emails work. And you have options like the variables as you would in the emails as well. You'll also notice here, we have a number of days. So day 1, day 3, day 7. This is indicative of the cadence of your sequence. So day 1 is typically the day that you turn a sequence on or the day that you've added a new batch of contacts. Day 3 will be based off of when an individual received the previous step. So this is not a global setting. If I add 10 people today and then 10 people tomorrow, day 3 will be staggered for those different groups. So do keep that in mind when setting up these options. You can change the delays at any point. It's not going to cause a massive overhaul or disruption in your sequence. It's just going to start processing another 20-minute kind of processing phase and then continue sending from where it left off. In addition to the cadence, we also have our schedules. So I'm going to skip ahead a few steps here. We will get back to this in a moment. So the scheduling, you will be able to choose days of the week and then windows within those days for the emails to go out. You have full customization over when these emails are being sent. By default, it's going to usually default to 9 to 5 Eastern or PST. But you can grab these windows and move them around however you'd like. You can minimize the windows, extend them, whatever you think is going to be best for your particular audience. We do find that Mondays and Fridays tend to be on the lower end as far as engagement is concerned. You're going into the weekend on Friday, so people tend to dip out before quitting time or as fast as they can. And then Mondays, you're a little bit more lethargic. It takes you a little bit of ramping up to get into the full swing of things. So Tuesday through Thursday is when people are most active and are most likely to want to engage with anything that you have to say. We also find that the earlier the sends go out, the better. So something along the lines here would work quite well. So you're getting them right when they sit down to start their workday, and you're hitting them around that lunchtime. This is when people are going to be most proactive because, again, the closer you get to quitting time, in general, people tend to kind of just want to get out of there as soon as they can. So you want to hit them when they're in full swing. Again, going back to that cadence option we were talking about, day 1, day 3, day 7, if your email happens to land on a day that you have not specified for sending, the system will understand this and will simply not send the email out until the next available window occurs. So it's automatically going to backlog any of your steps. We will never skip a step. We will never skip a contact. We will get through everybody. It's just going to be backlogged a little bit until the next available window appears. We're getting a lot of questions here. Do you think now is a pretty good time to touch on anything, or should we go through the rest of this?
We can, yes, let's touch on them. There's probably actually only two. So I'm kind of going back and forth in chats with some of the people. So there are two questions. So I mentioned that we had a question from Josh. So his question is, can you inject personalization into a subset of contacts in a sequence, or would it need to be a separate sequence?
Great question. So I'm actually going to X out of here. Everything that we've created will autosave. So let's just go to the sequences menu here. And let's go to test sequences. Let's click into hello viewers. So you'll have different tabs denoting different options that you can perform in your sequences. To customize an individual or a subgroup of individuals, you'll want to go into the preview tab here. This is where you can make custom edits on an individual basis. You can customize pretty much anything. You can even do more video embeds, images, attachments for unique individuals, and everything will be saved specifically for them. So for example, let's just change hey to hi. Any change that you make will be denoted by a little arrow. There we go. And so if you don't like the changes that you've made, or if you can't remember exactly what you've done, you can always hit that little arrow and it will revert back to the version you originally had in the steps tab here. So you will have to make all of these changes one at a time. There's no way to mass change all of the people from a specific company outside of using the variable system that we mentioned. If that is what you're planning on doing, it may be simpler to create a separate sequence based on your different segments. But if you are looking to customize just a small group, this is definitely the place to do it.
All right. We have another question from Tasha. This is more in terms of best practices with the steps that you're creating. So Tasha wants to know, for step 4, for example, how long after the first 3 steps would you recommend sending out a step 4 email?
Beautiful. So we are going to have a more dedicated session all about content best practices, but to give you guys a little bit of a preview here, this is the ideal kind of outline that we recommend. And I typically wait around a week before I re-engage my prospects. The reason being, I am going to create a story essentially with my first 3 steps. I'm going to introduce myself and what I'm doing, and a couple of questions just to get them thinking about ways that they can improve their situation. Step 2 is where I'm going to expand on how I'm going to assist them by going into some specific examples. And then step 3, I'm going to get ahead of the conversation and start answering questions that they haven't even asked yet. I want a little bit of time to sink in and for them to kind of really understand what I've talked about here. And I also don't want to come across as too pushy before I re-engage. So about a week before reintroducing a new topic is typically what I would recommend.
Perfect. Thank you. We also have a question from Paul. If a contact completes the sequence without engaging, can you automatically push them to a nurture sequence? And Josh, I believe you are going to talk about this with triggers in a few minutes, right?
Absolutely. So once I'm done the kind of overall sequence setup, we will talk about triggers, but the short answer is yes, you can do that.
Perfect. Thank you.
All righty. So let's hop back into the new sequence here. So again, we can go into any of these sequences, update the steps, add new ones. There's really no limitation there. You can play around with your schedule as often as you'd like. Again, similar to the cadence options, it's not going to disrupt your overall flow. It's just going to automatically adapt to any changes that you've made. If we go back into the scheduling for a moment here, when you're importing your contacts, we can automatically detect their time zone if you have city, country, and state information. State isn't completely necessary if they're not in the States. But with that information, we will automatically be able to detect their time zone. And if you have this option enabled, we will send in these windows of your choice their local time zone instead of whatever option you've chosen as default. So that just makes things look a little bit more contextual from the recipient side. We also have an option to skip US public holidays if you don't want to send on Thanksgiving or something like that. Most people will want to avoid sending that, but it all does come down to your particular audience. So hopping back into the sequence, let's just round out with the settings and the people. So if we go to the people tab within the sequence, there are a couple of options that we can use here. Once we load in, I apologize, I'm not at my home internet, so this is a little bit slower than I'm used to. So if we go to new contact, add from existing will give you a list of all of the contacts you have on your main people page that aren't currently in sequences. So I can select them and then add them directly to the sequence that I'm working in. I usually prefer a more direct method. I will go import from CSV, and most people are familiar with this process, but import from CSV will open up a window here. You can grab the file of choice from your desktop, drop it into the window. Oh, there we go. And then after a few moments, that should give you a list of all of the different columns that you have available on that CSV file. You can then map those fields to any default options that we have within reply, and any custom fields that you have on that file can be either created brand new from here, or as Stephanie showed up top, you can create them from within your settings as well. So we have a number of default options here. If we scroll down to the bottom, here's a list of all of our custom fields. And if we still don't have a match, we can create a brand new custom field. By default, the only two options that are mandatory are first name and email address. Neither necessarily needs to be accurate, though they both do need to exist in order to create a contact. In the event that we don't have either of those, we will simply skip over them. They won't be added at all. If we do find a match for the people that you're trying to include, we never keep duplicates in reply. So we will simply update the existing version, and we do that based off of email address. So rest assured, you're not going to have a bunch of duplicates running around in multiple different sequences. We do try to keep things as clean as possible for you. Let's just go to continue here. Alrighty. You can also directly add people into a list. So lists are manual ways to organize the different contacts. They are not tied directly into sequences. So I would recommend using things like the filtering system instead, just because they automatically update based on the properties that you include. But once the import does go through, you'll get a kind of verification screen. So imported means they are net new contacts. They did not exist in your account prior to this file. Updated, again, means we found an email address that matched one of the contacts and we've updated the existing record. Skipped means we found multiple individuals on the file that had the same email address, so we just skipped any duplicates. And import errors refers to things that are formatted incorrectly or are missing information. And in any case, for skipped and import errors, you will get a CSV file that you can grab yourself to see what was missing and who was affected. In this case, I do already have the individual assigned to this CSV file in my other sequence, so they were not automatically added here. But if they were available to be sent emails, they would automatically be added to this sequence. The third and final way to add people to a sequence is if you go to the main people page, where everybody is housed by default. You will be able to grab specific individuals and then move them using the paper airplane icon into the sequence of your choice. If you want to, you can also move people into the middle of a sequence, so you don't necessarily need to start them right at the beginning, though most of the time you will opt to. But if, for example, I wanted someone to get step 3 and I wanted step 3 to start processing right away, I could hit ignore step delay and then move contact. So step 3 would start processing as soon as possible for them. And then all of these subsequent delays would still be intact. So your follow-up schedule will still remain. It's just going to skip 1 and 2. I'm not sure if you guys can see me as well as my screen, but I have a little dog right next to me and she's just kind of getting a little antsy. So lots of dog stuff today.
Does your dog want to go on camera by any chance?
I'll bring her out. She's just kind of shy for now.
She's shy, okay.
I also don't want to get her too riled up so she starts barking. So
I guess that is true. Good point.
hopefully we can wrap up soon before that happens.
Yeah.
So that pretty much covers it for these sequences. I think I'll go into the sequence settings very quickly, but I do want to touch on filters and then triggers before we take off.
And Josh, before you hop in there, the chat's been super busy, which is really good. We have a lot of our viewers kind of, answering other people's questions and kind of offering suggestions to them and helping them out, which is great. So as usual, we're getting a lot of questions about deliverability. Deliverability is a very hot topic, which, obviously, like, you want to make sure that your emails are, going and landing in, someone's direct inbox, not going to spam. You want to make sure that you are maintaining the health and reputation of your domain and your email address. So for everyone here, who's concerned about deliverability, has questions, just want to let you guys know that our next session is actually going to be an hour just focused on deliverability. We're actually going to have our deliverability team on with us. So if you have any questions, you can, come ask them. They're the experts. But yeah, just want to let you guys know that we will be touching on that in our next session.
Beautiful. Very briefly, anytime you're using things like images or attachments, even the video option, Those are all examples of HTML-based content. And the further you lean into that, the less likely you are to land in the primary inbox folder of your recipients. So we do recommend showing caution there, though there are definitely benefits to using those depending on the use case. Specifically for doing newsletter style sequencing, you're going to want to make them look a little bit more engaging, a little bit more flashy. Though do keep in mind, you are more likely to land in things like promotions, updates, or potentially even spam. Here she is, you guys, if you can see her. But yeah, we're going to dive a lot more into that. But rule of thumb, if you're using a lot of links, 1 is usually the limit that we will recommend. And there is essentially a hierarchy of HTML-based things that you want to avoid. So links are the least kind of offensive. Then it goes into images, then attachments, or then videos, then attachments. So the further down that list you go, the more extreme hit you're going to take to your overall deliverability score. Getting back to the settings here, just to start winding things down. In your settings, you will have the option to assign your sender email. If you have multiple emails attached in your account settings, you will be able to attach all of those sender addresses to the same sequence. The system, again, very similarly to how the A/B testing works, will automatically split the list as evenly as possible amongst the different sender addresses that you have. The system does queue your contacts instantly. So if you're creating a sequence, you only have one email address here, and then you add all of the people, all of them will automatically be assigned to Joshua at reply.io. If I then later on down the line add a second email address so I can help split the list, they're already assigned to my main account, so that wouldn't work. What you would have to do is add all of your sender email addresses first, then the contacts second, so they're appropriately distributed. We are looking at ways to fix this because it does commonly come up in our support chats. But as of now, add your sender email addresses first, make all of your settings complete, then add the people to your sequences. Same thing goes for your LinkedIn accounts. If you did have one connected in your account settings, it will be available for you to choose here. That's going to ask me to connect to my LinkedIn account. Under general settings, very similar to what Stephanie showed previously, you can choose the overall limit of emails per day, as well as the daily prospects throttling. Rule of thumb is if you want your email limit to be 200, traditionally you should keep your daily prospects throttling the same number or higher. Max daily prospects throttling takes into consideration all step types, including emails. So it's things like LinkedIn, calls, SMS. But yeah, so rule of thumb, traditionally you just keep them the same, or if you have some extraneous steps in there, you want to make this a little higher. Then we have our delay between each email sent. This is acting as a baseline. This is not a constant. So we are going to wait approximately this much amount of time before we send out the new one. We do vary this to avoid patterns, which in turn avoids spam filters. So around a minute is usually best practice. We have it by default to around 35 seconds, which also works, but we find best results with around a minute. Opens tracking is on by default and links tracking is off by default. You can swap these whenever you need to, but again, do keep in mind, this is turning off opens tracking. This is turning on links tracking. We've had some instances of people thinking that opens was off, and then they just click this without fully kind of comprehending what this was, and then they're not getting any opens on their sequences. So do keep that in mind. And we also have an option to limit the number of same domain prospects per day. So similar to the element that Stephanie brought up, This refers specifically to all of the people sharing a domain or a company. Typically, we will recommend keeping this at 1 just to avoid stepping on any of the toes of other conversations going on. But again, it's up to you how you guys want to interact with your particular audience. By default, if somebody responds to your sequence, regardless of the context, they will be marked as finished and replied, though you can adjust this. So you can, in the case of newsletter style sequences, continue processing steps regardless of how they interact. And if they finish all of the steps and they haven't interacted at all, you can choose a set number of days before the system will automatically mark them as finished for any trickling in responses. We will skip calls handling and task handling for today. We'll save that for another session, but by default, everything is set to manual. So you'll have to go into the tasks menu and adjust those appropriately. All right, and now we can get to the triggers, and then we will just open it up for any questions.
Yeah, so triggers, I really love triggers. They're a really great way to automate, a lot of activity with your prospects. So I think it was Paul that asked the question before about being able to automatically move people to a new sequence if they haven't engaged. So like Josh is going to show you, there's a host of options that you can select for these triggers, different conditions, different actions that you can choose. So hopefully we can run through these in 5 minutes and then keep maybe 5 minutes at the end to answer some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, when we do more sessions for advanced functionality, we're going to dive very deeply into these things, but just very kind of top of mind. By default, the sequences are pretty straightforward. Sequence step 1 goes out. If they do not respond to step 1, they'll move to step 2, and then they will continue that trend until they do engage. The triggers allows you to capitalize on specific types of engagement or even non-engagement, and then move them to different sequences. You can even update their contact profiles to leave little notes for yourself, for other team members, or you can move them to different owners so that they can pick up conversations. There's a lot of play here and a lot of flexibility. So the limitations are really going to be based on kind of whatever you can come up with. And if you feel that a trigger or an action isn't available that you really need, feel free to let us know. We are in a big kind of feedback mode right now at Reply. So now is the time to get your voices heard. But just to give you guys a couple of quick examples, one of the most common uses is based on positive responses. So when people reply to your emails, based on the context, we will give them different inbox categories. So we will go inbox category set. We will choose inbox category equals interested. And we can go further and set the condition. We can tie this trigger to a specific sequence or even a specific set of contacts that meet, like a company or even a location segment. Then once you're satisfied with your condition, we can move them into a more dedicated follow-up. So you can choose the next sequence that you want them to be a part of. And again, you can even move them to a specific step within that sequence. So this is a great way of just automatically and dynamically capitalizing off of specific engagements rather than kind of sitting in your sequences and babysitting them all of the time. Another very common example would be contact opened your message. So let's say we're going to, again, tie it to a specific sequence. Sequence equals, let's just go April. And let's do number of views. So if they view this sequence more than 5 times, again, we can move them to a more dedicated follow-up with maybe pointed information about what I'm talking about in my sequence on a kind of broad scale. If you want to go even more kind of in depth, you can tie this trigger to a specific step within the specific sequence. So if they're watching or if they're clicking on this specific step X number of times, that's really showing that there's something there that they're really interested in. We can then capitalize that by, again, moving them to a sequence, adding them to a list so I can manually choose to maybe follow up with them on LinkedIn or send them a call, whatever the case is. or again, assign a different owner so that they can pick up the conversation from there. And again, making that look more dynamic and even more genuine, because people do tend to hand off or CC individuals that are better apt or better equipped to dive into specific topics. So lots of different play here. Nothing will happen no matter how much you play around with this until you turn it on. So you can kind of mess around with your filters. You can even set a very restrictive filter for a specific email address if you want to test it to see if it works before you kind of set it live for everybody. So we do highly encourage you guys to kind of hop in here, mess around with stuff, see what you can come up with. And again, if anything's missing, or if you feel like there's not enough specificity, let us know and we'll see what we can do for you.
Yeah,
now
and
I'm really losing my voice a little bit. So
okay, you take a break for a minute there, Josh. And like we were saying, with the triggers, the actions that you can choose are really going to depend on the conditions that you select. So, there may not always be the option to move to a sequence, just depending on how you're setting up that trigger. So keep that in mind as well. And like Josh said, I just encourage you to go and play around with those triggers, see what options are available. If you find that there is, a condition that would be beneficial to your workflow that is not available, feel free to, you can email me or Josh, or you can always reach out to our support team via live chat and, just submit a feature request. Our product team is all ears. A lot of the updates that we've had recently have been based on customer feedback. So we do listen to your suggestions and what you want to see. So by all means, send it over to our team and we'll fire that off to our product team. But also, if there are some conditions that you're not seeing in those triggers, you can always utilize the filter option in the people page. So either in your sequence or on an account level, you can create specific filters based on engagement or non-engagement, like Paul mentioned earlier, and then you can select them and move them into another sequence as well. So other options there in terms of the actions that you can create within those sequences too.
Yes, I did say I wanted to touch on this. Very similar to the conditions that we were just kind of going through. You have access to pretty much all of the different stats, all of the different types of interactions, all of the different fields and statuses, even your custom fields. So play around here. You can save these. Anything that you do save, we do recommend giving a unique name. You'll be able to find those saved filters in this more drop-down menu here. Alrighty, and I think with that, we've covered the basics. So this should be enough to get you guys started. We want to use this last little bit of time to answer any questions.
Yes. So there was a question that I wanted to get to, from Vitor, just to clarify, would you change your signature to HTML? And thank you, Josh, for jumping in, because your answer was the exact same answer that I was going to give. You want to use as little HTML as possible. So whether that's signature or your email content, the body of your emails, try to stick to plain text as much as you can. So thanks, Josh, for that. We do have another question. Can we customize as per our business needs after we purchase the platform and start working with it? Yes, absolutely. There are many different ways that, our team can work with you to, create or set up your account in the way that would be more beneficial to your workflow or your specific team. So absolutely.
Yeah, it's going back to the number of add-ons that we spoke about earlier. Depending on kind of what your workflows are, what your preferences are, we can always kind of mix and match different options for you and make it as easy to use as possible.
Yeah. And then Josh has a question. Do you have any certified partners that do management of email campaigns on Reply? We actually do. So I will send that over to you. It's probably a link to our partner and affiliates page. So I can send that over to you and you can take a look there. I do have a couple that are top of mind, but I will send them over to you.
Yes.
All right. So if there's no other questions, Josh, is there anything that you wanted to kind of finish up with?
Yeah, actually, if you click on a contact's profile, this is pretty small, but most people don't realize that you can do this. So if you click on a contact, their profile will appear on the right. This is going to be just the basics. You can do one-off instances of anything you want for the individual. The emails are tracked if you send them via one-off. For opens and links, you can kind of customize it. But the thing that people don't realize is you can extend the profile, and then you'll get access to the full comprehensive history from the moment that the contact was added to the account to any interactions that they experience, even down to the moment that that action occurred. So this is a really great way to kind of just deep dive into individuals, how they're interacting, when they're interacting, and then you can relay these into changes in your actual sequences. You'll also be able to see all of the various threads that you have going on with the individuals, as well as the associated stats and timings for those as well. So yeah, a lot of information in this little arrow. I'd say 70% of the people that I have onboarding calls with never realize that this is a thing. So just do keep your eyes peeled for that.
All right. I'm actually just sending a message in the chat.
Okay.
Hopefully, Josh, you get that before we sign off. So yeah, so we're at time. We're at 2 o'clock right now. So yeah, so like I said, we are going to be having another session in 3 weeks. So keep an eye on your emails for invitations from our marketing team. Like I said, we will be covering deliverability, but as we go through these sessions, we will be getting a bit more in depth with specific features within the platform. Things like the meeting booking feature, we will touch on triggers a bit more. One thing that we want to touch on was reporting today. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, so we will get to that as well. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to our support team via live chat, or you can message myself or Josh. We're always happy to help. This is being recorded. And so Rima from our marketing team, who's here with us as well, she did confirm that this will be sent out to everyone who registered to join us. So thanks again for coming, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
See you guys. Thanks for being here, and see you soon.
Bye, guys.